The thunderous hooves of the stagecoach horses echoed through the canyon as Faith Allerton clung desperately to the leather strap hanging from the ceiling, her free hand instinctively shielding her swollen belly beneath the woolen shawl she never removed in public. Dust billowed through the open windows as the coach careened around another bend, sending her lurching against the opposite wall. 18 weeks pregnant and 300 miles from anything resembling home, Faith had never felt more alone. "Whoa there!" The driver's voice boomed from above as the coach slowed abruptly. "Brimstone station coming up, folks." Faith peered through the window at the ramshackle collection of buildings that constituted Brimstone, Colorado territory. It wasn't much: a general store, a saloon, what appeared to be a small church, and a smattering of weathered buildings, but after 3 days of brutal travel, any respite was welcome. The year was 1876, and the promises of a new life in the West had drawn Faith like a moth to flame, even as her situation grew more desperate with each passing day. The coach jerked to a stop, and the door swung open to reveal a sun-baked man with leathery skin and a gray-flecked beard. "Brimstone Station," he announced unnecessarily. 20-minute stop for water and provisions. Those continuing on to Silver Creek be back by then or get left behind. Faith's fellow passengers, a drummer with a case of samples, and an elderly couple, disembarked quickly, eager to stretch their legs. She followed more carefully, adjusting her shawl to ensure it draped properly over her growing secret. The mountain air was crisp and clean compared to the stuffy confines of the coach, and she inhaled deeply, savoring the momentary peace. "Madam," the driver addressed her as she stepped onto the weathered boardwalk. "You sure Silver Creek's where you're headed? Ain't much there, but mines and men who ain't seen a proper lady in months." Faith nodded firmly. "I have arrangements waiting," she lied, clutching her small valise tighter. "My cousin has secured employment for me." The driver looked unconvinced but shrugged. "Your business, madam." "Just don't recommend a young woman traveling alone in these parts." As he walked away, Faith felt the weight of her deception pressing down alongside the burden of her condition. There was no cousin, no employment, only the desperate need to escape Philadelphia and the scandal that would have destroyed her family name had she remained. The father of her child, a married banker with political ambitions, had made it abundantly clear that exposure would ruin them both. He had provided enough money for her journey west with the understanding she would never return or contact him again. Faith made her way to the general store, hoping to purchase some crackers to settle her queasy stomach. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and the proprietor, a portly man with spectacles perched on his nose, looked up from his ledger. "Afternoon, miss. Just passing through." "Yes," Faith replied, her eyes scanning the shelves. "I was hoping for some crackers or biscuits, if you have them. Got some fresh ones just yesterday." He gestured toward a glass jar on the counter. "Continuing on to Silver Creek, are you?" Faith nodded, weariness evident in her posture despite her efforts to appear composed. "Don't mean to pry, but what business takes you there?" "Not much for a lady in Silver Creek." "I have family," she repeated her practiced lie. "My cousin has arranged work for me." The shopkeeper's expression grew concerned. "What kind of work, if you don't mind my asking?" "Silver Creek ain't exactly known for its respectable employment opportunities for ladies." Before Faith could respond, the door opened again, and a tall figure blocked the afternoon light momentarily. She turned to see a man step inside, removing his hat to reveal sun-streaked brown hair and eyes the color of well-worn saddle leather. His clothes were dusty from travel, but unlike many frontier men she'd encountered, he appeared clean and well-kept beneath the trail grime. "Afternoon, Sullivan," the shopkeeper called out. "Thought you'd still be up at the North Ridge." "Cattle drive finished early," the newcomer replied, his voice surprisingly gentle for a man of his stature. "Thought I'd stock up before heading back to the ranch." His gaze fell on Faith, and he nodded politely. "Madam, Mr. Sullivan here runs the Lazy S about 20 miles north of Silver Creek," the shopkeeper explained to Faith. "One of the few honest ranchers left in these parts." The man Sullivan seemed embarrassed by the praise. "Samuel Zachary." He introduced himself, extending a calloused hand. "Most folks call me Sam." "Faith Allerton," she replied, accepting his handshake briefly before pulling her shawl tighter around herself. "Miss Allerton's heading to Silver Creek," the shopkeeper informed him. "Says she has family there." Something flickered in Samuel's expression, doubt, perhaps, or concern, but he masked it quickly. Silver Creek's a rough place for a lady traveling alone. Mining town full of men who haven't seen civilized society in months. His eyes, warm and direct, met hers. You sure that's where you want to be heading? Faith felt her resolve wavering under his scrutiny. For months, she had maintained her facade of calm determination, but something about this stranger's genuine concern threatened to unravel her carefully constructed plans. Before she could respond, a wave of dizziness washed over her, and she reached for the counter to steady herself. "Miss?" Samuel stepped forward quickly, his hand catching her elbow to stabilize her. "Are you all right?" Just tired from the journey," Faith managed, though the room continued to swim before her eyes. "I haven't eaten since morning." "George, fetch the lady some water," Samuel directed the shopkeeper, who hurried to comply. "And some of those biscuits." The world tilted alarmingly, and Faith felt her knees buckle. Strong arms caught her before she could hit the floor, and the last thing she remembered was being lifted as if she weighed nothing at all. Faith awoke to the unfamiliar sensation of a cool cloth on her forehead and the murmur of low voices nearby. She was lying on a narrow cot in what appeared to be a small back room of the store. Panic surged through her as her hand flew to her belly, confirming that her shawl was still in place. "Easy now," came a woman's voice, and Faith turned to see a matronly figure sitting beside the cot. "You gave us quite a scare, dear." "How long was I?" Faith struggled to sit up. "Not more than 15 minutes, the woman assured her. "I'm Martha Peterson, the shopkeeper's wife. That tall drink of water who carried you in here is waiting outside." Worried sick though he'd never admit it, Faith's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "The stagecoach left about 5 minutes ago," Martha confirmed. "George told the driver you wouldn't be continuing today." Alarm shot through Faith. "But I must get to Silver Creek." "My plans, Silver Creek ain't going nowhere," Martha cut in firmly. "And neither are you until we're sure you're fit to travel." "When's the last time you had a proper meal, girl?" Faith couldn't remember. The morning sickness had been relentless, and the stage's constant jostling hardly encouraged appetite. "That's what I thought," Martha said, interpreting her silence. "And when's that baby due?" Faith froze, her hand instinctively tightening on the shawl. "I don't." Martha's expression softened. "Been around enough to recognize the signs, dear. Don't worry, I'm not one to judge. Just concerned about you traveling in your condition." Tears welled in Faith's eyes. Months of solitary worry suddenly too much to bear. "August," she whispered. "The doctor in Denver said August." Martha patted her hand. "4 months to go, then. You got people waiting in Silver Creek." Faith shook her head, the lie she'd maintained finally crumbling. "No, there's no one. I needed somewhere far from home." Understanding dawned in Martha's eyes. "And the father?" "Doesn't want to be found," Faith replied, her voice hardening. "And I have no desire to find him." Martha nodded, accepting this without further question. "Well, you can't continue today. The next stage comes through on Thursday. That's 3 days from now. You'll stay with us until then. Regain your strength." "I couldn't impose." "Nonsense." Martha waved away her protest. "George and I have the room, and it'll be nice having another woman around, even just for a few days." Before Faith could respond, there was a gentle knock at the door, and Samuel's tall frame filled the doorway. He looked relieved to see her sitting up. "How are you feeling, Miss Allerton?" he asked, remaining respectfully by the door. "Better, thank you, Mr. Zachary," Faith replied, embarrassed by the situation. "And grateful for your assistance." "Sam's offered to come back tomorrow with his wagon," Martha explained. "Thought you might like to rest at his ranch until the next stage. It's more comfortable than our spare room above the store." "That's very kind, but I couldn't possibly," Faith began. "My sister Eleanor lives at the ranch," Sam interjected, correctly interpreting her hesitation. "She'd welcome the company. It's a proper house, not some cowboy bunkhouse." Faith glanced between them, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness of strangers. "Why would you do this for someone you don't know?" Samuel's expression turned serious. "Out here, we look after folks in need. It's the only way to survive. My ranch is on the way to Silver Creek anyhow. I can bring you to town for Thursday's stage if you're still set on going there." Later that evening, after a simple but nourishing meal in the Petersons' living quarters above the store, Faith sat by the window, watching the main street of Brimstone settle into twilight. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the occasional flutter of movement that had begun just weeks earlier. "What am I doing?" she whispered to her unborn child. "Where are we going to go?" The truth was, she had no plan beyond reaching Silver Creek. The money she had would last perhaps 2 months if she was frugal. After that, she didn't know. She had skills she could read and write well, knew mathematics and bookkeeping, but who would hire a single woman with a newborn child? The next morning, Samuel Zachary arrived as promised with a wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses. Faith had spent an uncomfortable night wrestling with her options, but had eventually decided to accept his offer. 3 days at a proper ranch would give her time to think, to plan more carefully than she had thus far. Martha helped Faith into the wagon, pressing a small package of food into her hands. "For the journey," she insisted. "And remember what we discussed." What they had discussed was Martha's suggestion that Faith consider staying in the area instead of continuing to Silver Creek. "Brimstone's small," Martha had said, "but we're growing. The school needs a teacher come fall. With your education, you'd be perfect." Faith had made no promises, but the seed had been planted in her mind. The journey to the Lazy S took most of the day, following a rough trail that wound through stands of pine and aspen. Samuel proved to be a quiet traveling companion, neither prying nor ignoring her, but offering occasional observations about the land and wildlife they passed. "My father claimed this land 15 years ago," he explained as they crested a rise that revealed a sweeping valley below. "Built it up from nothing but a tent and some stubborn Texas longhorns." "It's beautiful," Faith said sincerely, taking in the patchwork of meadows, creeks, and rolling hills. "Is your father still?" "Passed on 3 years ago," Samuel replied. "Ma went a year before him. It's just me and Eleanor now, and about a dozen ranch hands." As they approached the ranch, Faith could see a sprawling single-story house built of sturdy logs with a wide porch wrapping around it. Several outbuildings and corrals surrounded it, and in the distance, cattle grazed on spring grass. It was, Faith realized, a proper home, something she hadn't expected to find so far from civilization. A slender woman with Samuel's same brown hair emerged from the house as they pulled up, wiping her hands on an apron. Her smile was warm and genuine as Samuel helped Faith down from the wagon. "You must be Miss Allerton," she greeted. "I'm Eleanor Zachary. Welcome to the Lazy S." Faith's 3 days at the ranch stretched into a week as she found herself drawn into the rhythm of life there. Eleanor, only a year younger than Faith's 23 years, proved to be intelligent and well-read, having been educated back east before returning to help her brother run the ranch after their parents' deaths. "Sam insisted I get a proper education," Eleanor explained as they sat shelling peas on the porch. "Said I needed more options than just being some rancher's wife." Faith found herself warming to Samuel more each day. He was unlike any man she had ever known, straightforward yet gentle, hard-working yet thoughtful. He treated his ranch hands with respect and his sister with obvious affection and pride. And though he surely noticed her condition despite her careful concealment, he never once mentioned it or treated her differently because of it. By the second week, Faith had given up the pretense of waiting for the stage to Silver Creek. When Samuel offered her the position of bookkeeper for the ranch, a job currently divided haphazardly between himself and Eleanor, she accepted with a relief that surprised her. "I can offer room and board plus $20 a month," he said. "It's not much, but it's more than fair," Faith interrupted, touched by his generosity. "But Mr. Zachary, Sam," he corrected gently. "Sam," she amended. "I should be honest with you. I'm in a delicate condition." She gestured vaguely toward her middle, still hidden beneath her ever-present shawl. "I know," he replied simply. "Eleanor guessed right away, and she's not one to keep secrets from me. It doesn't change my offer." Faith stared at him in disbelief. "Most people wouldn't want someone in my situation under their roof." Samuel's expression remained calm. "Most people haven't had to rely on the kindness of strangers to survive. My parents came west with nothing but hope and hard work. They never turned away someone in need, and neither will I." As spring blossomed into summer, Faith found herself settling into life at the Lazy S with surprising ease. She brought order to the ranch's financial records, wrote letters to suppliers, and helped Eleanor with household matters. Her belly grew more prominent, making the shawl less and less effective as concealment, but no one at the ranch commented on it or treated her with anything but respect. Samuel, she discovered, was a man of surprising depths. Though he had little formal education, his bookshelves contained volumes of Shakespeare, Emerson, and Whitman alongside practical manuals on animal husbandry and agriculture. In the evenings, he often read aloud while Faith and Eleanor sewed or mended, his voice giving life to the words in a way that made Faith see them anew. One evening in early July, Faith found Samuel alone on the porch, watching a summer thunderstorm roll across the distant mountains. She had come to return a book he'd lent her, but hesitated in the doorway, struck by the peaceful solitude of the moment. "You can join me," he said without turning, somehow sensing her presence. "The lightning's putting on quite a show tonight." Faith settled into the chair beside him, laying the book on the small table between them. "Thank you for lending me this. I haven't read Thoreau since school." "And what did you think of him now?" Samuel asked, his eyes still on the distant storm. "He has good ideas about simplicity and self-reliance," Faith replied thoughtfully. "Though I'm not sure I could live alone in the woods like he did." Samuel smiled. "Nor I. For all his talk of solitude, I think people need each other too much for that kind of life." "You speak as if from experience," Faith observed. He was quiet for a moment. "After my parents died, I nearly lost myself in grief and work. If not for Eleanor, I might have become nothing more than the land and the cattle." He turned to look at her then, his expression open. "Having you here these past months has reminded me there's more to life than just surviving day to day." Faith felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the summer evening. "I should thank you for that same reminder. When I arrived in Brimstone, I had nothing but fear for the future." "And now?" he asked softly. She placed a hand on her swollen belly, no longer hidden beneath the shawl when they were alone. "Now I have hope. For myself and my child." Their eyes held for a long moment, and Faith felt something shift between them, a boundary crossed, a possibility acknowledged. Then a particularly bright flash of lightning illuminated the sky, followed quickly by a crack of thunder that made Faith jump. "Storm's moving closer," Samuel observed, standing. "We should head inside." The baby came 3 weeks early, on a sweltering August night, when the air hung heavy and still over the valley. Faith woke to sharp pain and dampness and called out for Eleanor, who had insisted on moving into Faith's room as her time grew near. What followed was 18 hours of labor that tested Faith's endurance beyond anything she had ever experienced. Eleanor stayed by her side throughout, wiping her brow and offering encouragement, while Samuel paced the hallway outside, occasionally shouting questions about what was happening and if the doctor had arrived from town. "Men," Eleanor muttered as another of Samuel's inquiries came through the door. Useless at times like these. But her fond smile belied her words. When Faith finally held her daughter in her arms, tiny but perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that already seemed to take in the world with curiosity, the months of fear and uncertainty melted away. This small life depended on her completely, and for the first time, Faith felt entirely certain she could provide what was needed. "She's beautiful," Eleanor whispered, tears in her eyes. "What will you name her?" Faith looked down at the small face. "Charlotte," she said, "after my grandmother. Charlotte Hope Allerton." "A fine name," came Samuel's voice from the doorway, where he stood looking both terrified and awestruck. May I come in?" Eleanor ushered him to Faith's bedside, where he gazed down at the baby with undisguised wonder. "Would you like to hold her?" Faith asked. "I've never held a baby before," he admitted, looking panicked at the suggestion. "There's nothing to it," Eleanor assured him, already lifting Charlotte from Faith's arms. "Support her head, like this." Samuel cradled the infant with a tenderness that brought fresh tears to Faith's eyes. His large hands, so capable with horses and cattle, held Charlotte as if she were made of the finest porcelain. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "Welcome to the Lazy Yes." In the weeks that followed, Faith observed with growing emotion how Samuel had taken to fatherhood despite having no biological claim to Charlotte. He carved a cradle with his own hands, lined with the softest blankets Eleanor could find. He would walk the floor with Charlotte at night when she was fussy, singing old cowboy songs in his deep, gentle voice until she settled. He spoke to her as if she understood every word, telling her about the ranch, the animals, and the mountains beyond. And through it all, his feelings for Faith grew more evident, though he never pressed her or made her uncomfortable. It was in the small things: fresh wildflowers appearing on her breakfast tray, a new book from town that he thought she might enjoy, his hand steadying her elbow as they walked to the garden. 3 months after Charlotte's birth, on a crisp October afternoon when the aspen leaves shimmered gold in the breeze, Samuel asked Faith to ride with him to his favorite spot on the ranch. Eleanor volunteered to watch Charlotte, practically pushing them out the door with a knowing smile. They rode at an easy pace, Samuel pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of his childhood adventures in these hills. Eventually, they came to a high meadow overlooking the entire valley, where a single massive oak tree provided shade. Samuel helped Faith from her horse and spread a blanket beneath the tree. "I've been wanting to show you this place," he said as they settled on the blanket. "My father proposed to my mother under this very tree. Said he wanted to give her the whole valley as a wedding gift." Faith smiled, her heart beginning to race at the implication. "It's beautiful. I can see why it's special to your family." Samuel took a deep breath, suddenly looking as nervous as the day Charlotte was born. "Faith, I'm not a man of fancy words or grand gestures, but these past months with you and Charlotte have been the happiest of my life." "Sam," Faith began, but he held up a hand. "Please, let me finish before I lose my nerve." He took her hand in his. "I know you came west to escape a difficult past. I know Charlotte's father is someone you left behind for good reason, but I want you to know that doesn't matter to me. What matters is who you are now, here, with us." His eyes, earnest and vulnerable, met hers. "I love you, Faith Allerton. I love Charlotte as if she were my own daughter. And if you'll have me, I'd be honored to spend the rest of my life proving that to you both." Tears spilled down Faith's cheeks as emotions overwhelmed her. "Sam, I never expected to find someone like you. I came west believing I would have to face everything alone. You're not alone anymore," he said simply. "Not if you don't want to be." Faith leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, giving her answer in the most direct way possible. When they finally parted, both breathless and smiling, she whispered, "Yes, Samuel Zachary. Yes to everything." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Brimstone, with Eleanor standing as Faith's witness and little Charlotte cradled in Martha Peterson's arms. The entire town turned out for the celebration, along with all the ranch hands from the Lazy S. That evening, after the festivities had wound down and they had returned to the ranch, now truly Faith's home, Samuel asked to speak with her privately in the study. She found him there looking uncharacteristically nervous, a small wooden box in his hands. "I have something for you," he said, presenting the box. "A wedding gift." Faith opened it to find a folded document inside. As she unfolded it, she realized it was a legal paper drawn up by the county judge. "It's adoption papers," Samuel explained. "If you sign them, Charlotte will legally be a Zachary. My daughter in the eyes of the law, as she already is in my heart." Fresh tears welled in Faith's eyes. "Sam, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to decide now," he assured her quickly. "I just wanted you to know." "Yes," Faith interrupted. "Yes, of course I'll sign them. Charlotte deserves a father who loves her, and you already do." Samuel's smile was brighter than she had ever seen it. "There's one more thing." He led her to the window that overlooked the ranch yard, where several ranch hands were gathered, constructing something by lantern light. "I asked the men to build a proper schoolhouse. The children from neighboring ranches need education, and with your background, I thought if you want me to be a teacher?" Faith asked, amazed at his thoughtfulness. "Only if it would make you happy," he said. "This is your home now, and I want you to have a purpose beyond just being my wife and Charlotte's mother, though those roles are precious to me." Faith turned to him, taking his face in her hands. "Samuel Zachary, you are the most remarkable man I have ever known." The following spring, when wildflowers carpeted the valley in a riot of color, the ranch hosted its first community gathering since Samuel and Faith's wedding. Families from miles around came to celebrate the completion of the schoolhouse and Faith's appointment as the area's first teacher. As the afternoon sun began to lengthen shadows across the yard, Samuel called for everyone's attention. He stood on the porch steps with Faith beside him, Charlotte now nearly 8 months old and strong enough to stand with support. "I want to thank you all for coming today," Samuel began, his arm around Faith's waist. "When my father staked his claim on this land, he dreamed of building not just a ranch, but a community. Today, with this schoolhouse, I feel we're honoring that dream." Cheers and applause greeted his words. Faith smiled up at him, pride evident in her expression. "But there's something else I'd like to say," Samuel continued, his voice taking on a more personal tone. "Many of you know that Faith came west alone last year, facing an uncertain future." He looked down at her, his expression filled with love. "What you may not know is that she carried with her not only courage and determination, but also our beautiful daughter, Charlotte." A murmur went through the crowd as Samuel knelt suddenly before Faith and little Charlotte. With gentle hands, he pushed aside the shawl Faith still sometimes wore out of habit, revealing her still rounded belly, a reminder of the journey that had brought her to him. "I never thought I'd be blessed with a family of my own," Samuel said, loud enough for all to hear, but his eyes fixed only on Faith and Charlotte. "But you two, you've given me more happiness than I ever thought possible." And there, before everyone gathered, Samuel Zachary kissed Faith's belly reverently, then lifted Charlotte to kiss her cheek as well. "Thank you," he whispered, "for making my life complete." Faith, tears streaming down her cheeks, helped him to his feet and into her embrace. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, celebrating not just a new schoolhouse, but the love that had blossomed against all odds in the wild frontier. That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Faith nestled against Samuel's chest. "Were you nervous?" she asked. "Making such a public declaration?" Samuel's fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Not for a moment. I wanted everyone to know how proud I am of you, of your strength, your courage in coming west alone. Sometimes I think about how differently things might have turned out," Faith mused. "If I hadn't fainted in that store in Brimstone, I like to think we would have found each other somehow," Samuel said. "That some things are meant to be." Faith smiled in the darkness. "You're becoming quite the romantic, Mr. Zachary." "Only for you, Mrs. Zachary," he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Only for you." Outside their window, the vast Colorado sky sparkled with stars, witnesses to a love that had bloomed in the most unexpected of circumstances. Faith Allerton Zachary, once alone and afraid, had found not just shelter but a true home, a loving husband, and a future filled with promise. The shawl that had once hidden her shame now lay folded in a drawer, a reminder of a journey completed and a new life begun.